fear of vaginas has deep roots. I remember schoolboy jokes about terrifying ones with teeth that could bite off a cock, or how the bone could drop, locking the penis inside so the man would remain captive in it forever, or at least until the girl consented to release him. Bizarre tales of the measures needed to avoid this circulated amongst boys who had never even seen, let alone touched, a real vagina, were commonplace whispers. This is certainly, at least in part, Freudian castration anxiety, which most men grow out of, but there is also a deep metaphysical fear of the vagina that affects all men, and always has. To a Jungian, the vagina is not only that of the blithe, nubile Inanna, but also that of her dark sister Ereshkigal. As well as the focus of male physical pleasure, it is the source of life, and also of death. Ereshkigal, the great Mother Earth, both gives us life and takes it away, and the metaphysical portal through which we must pass in both directions is the dark goddess sacred vagina. It is dark, mysterious, and terrifying. It is Camille Paglia's chthonic swamp, and just as horrifying as any other. As boys, though, we are unaware of this import. Suddenly, one strange day, girls became weird, desirable in a peculiar way. Their legs had somehow become interesting, their ankles fascinating, their prettiness troubling, and their hair curious in its attraction. Why was their skin so smooth, and why was that nice? Why did Pauline have such fascinating knees, while Jennifer did not? When they smiled at you, there was a strange feeling. Well, what is that? Why do I feel my stomach churning? The way they walked, why was that so oddly exciting? Why did the eye follow them so? What were those bumps in their blouses? Why were Fiona and Shirley so especially alluring in this mysterious way, while Irene and Jane still played Tig in the playground with us and laughed and joked like boys? Life became an endless alternation between intense sexual frustration and the temporary relief of masturbation. But most of all, it was confusion. Girls and their bodies, which had appeared out of nowhere overnight, you might say, were fascinating and clearly very, very dangerous. The unknown is always dangerous, but unlike exploring old ruined houses, which obviously were full of ghosts and vampires, there was an added dimension here. It wasn't like scaring ourselves silly with a Ouija board, or staying out all night in a graveyard, terrifying each other with imagined apparitions. No, we knew this unknown was serious, and it was real. Those monstrous, cock-munching, penis-entrapping vaginas were everywhere. Worse, they were between the legs of some species of earthbound angel so gorgeous you could not stop looking at them, no matter how hard you tried. These were angels whom, a mere year beforehand, you laughed at as the daft lassies who liked skipping when you played football. They were sent to torment you, to cause you to scurry home after school as quickly as you could and toss one off on the bed. The school was full of girls, and they all had one. Christ on a bike, they all have one. But what is the true nature of this fear? It is this: beauty and death are two sides of the same coin. The pursuit of the former entrains the realization of the latter. It is the deadly kiss of the Spider-Woman. Inanna and Ereshkigal are two aspects of the same goddess. This is what inspired the tales of sirens, who would sing so beautifully that sailors could not resist their call, then kill and eat them. Or the story of how the Gorgons, once the most beautiful and alluring women in the world, became hideous monsters whose glance could turn a man to stone. Or how the goddess Tiamat became a fell dragon that terrorized the world, bringing death and destruction until Marduk killed her. Beauty and death. It is the paradox that makes Inanna enchanting and lightsome, and Ereshkigal gloomy and dreadful. The goddess is like Janus, with two faces, but instead of each facing different directions, one hides behind the other. Beauty draws us in, makes us dance the maypole dance in our insouciant youth. We drink the heady wine of love and sex, pursue the angelic faces and pleasures of those bodies, but in the end, duty and death will claim us. No matter how hard we try, we can never escape Ereshkigal's clammy embrace. Boys are like moths to the flame. hopelessly attracted to what will consume them. Inside themselves, without even realizing it, they know that the vagina is a trap which will put an end to the delight of boyhood and bind them in the chains of responsibility, that it is the hell's mouth into the lair of Ereshkigal, the portal to the palace Ganzer. But they can't help themselves. They must have it, must flutter into the fire and be devoured by the relentless, unforgiving goddess who lurks there. The death of innocence. Most of us are familiar with the biblical story of Adam and Eve in Genesis. Few, however, understand it. This tale is actually derived from a much older one, the Sumerian tale of Gilgamesh and Enkidu. This is part of the Epic of Gilgamesh and was written circa 2500 BC, but likely contains much older themes. In it, the god king Gilgamesh is visited by a hunter who is frustrated because a wild man called Enkidu has been guiding the animals away from his traps. Enkidu's home is with the wild things on the uncultivated steppe, which is called Eden in Sumerian. He's completely free. When he has sex, it's with the animals. He knows no allegiance to anyone, man or woman, and his only loyalty is to the band of brothers he lives with. Gilgamesh asks the high priestess of Inanna for advice. She suggests sending a priestess, or more accurately, a temple harlot, or harem-tu, known as Shamhat, to seduce and tame Enkidu. Then he will return with her to the city and be civilized. To leave us in no doubt, the story tells us that Shamhat asks what to do. The high priestess tells her to come to Enkidu when he sleeps. Take off your clothes and lie naked beside him. When he wakes, he will be so enraptured by your beauty that he will make love to you. Do this until he is exhausted, and then he will come back to the city, meek as a lamb. Shamhat does as she's told. She's young and beautiful. As predicted, Enkidu wakes to find this vision of fecund femininity stretched out naked by his side, no doubt making appropriate eyes and tinkling her lapis lazuli earrings, and immediately has her. Their passion lasts a week, as they couple again and again, until Enkidu is exhausted. He decides to visit his friends, the animals, and tell them why he's been gone so long. But something awful happens. They smell Shamhat on him and realize that he is not one of them at all, but a man. They run from him and will not let him approach. 1, 2, 3. It doesn't take much analysis to see what's going on here. The Eden, whether the Sumerian steppe or the Garden of Genesis, is where a man can live free, untrammeled by responsibility. The animals are our boyhood friends, the ones with whom we spend so many happy and carefree hours. They are our band of brothers. But then something happens. We become aware of sex. At first, this is probably something we do with the other boys. Older boys showing younger boys how to masturbate and so on. But sooner or later, we will begin to hanker for more, to know what is that mystery that so attracts us, to feel it. And therein lies our undoing, for the price of knowledge is the loss of freedom. We will be ejected from the band of brothers. We'll have become men, not boys. After his rejection by the animals, distraught, Enkidu returns to the bower where he left Shamhat. She comforts him and tells him that he must come to the city, where he will see such things as he has never imagined, live in luxury, and be the friend of the king. They make love for another week, a very enthusiastic couple, and then she gives him her robes to wear and leads them out of Eden. In other words, Enkidu follows her dressed as a woman. He has been emasculated. The goddess' most wily intrigue has succeeded again, for where he thought to find manhood, he finds only subservience. The themes explored in this are remarkably similar to those of the Genesis version. Here too, Adam, before Eve arrives, runs with the animals, who are his friends. Shamhat seduces Enkidu, and by doing so closes him off forever from his previous life. He's lost his freedom. This is the first death that a boy must pass through. The death of freedom, or lack of responsibility, of independence, of being himself. It is his first sacrifice of self, in a life which will always be just that, sacrifice of the self. He has been tamed. He has become a man. Shamhat is woman. She is city. She is comfort peace and order. She is the warm, soft bed suffused with the aroma of a woman. She is the promise of limitless sexual satisfaction, a promise rarely kept. She is the cool hand on one's brow, the soft breast to lean on, the good mother of a man's children. She is all of the things that civilization brings. But this has a price. Enkidu can no longer play with the wild animals, or live in complete freedom, answering to no other. He cannot take back his innocence. Man must submit to woman in order to have the pleasures women offer. That is why he symbolically accepted Shamhat's robes. By doing so, he has submitted to her. So sex takes the wild, untamed, uncivilized beast and turns him into man. He must give up the pleasures he has enjoyed for that one pleasure that only woman can provide. But with it comes responsibility. This is an ancient tale of youthful paradise lost in the burdensome life of a married man, whose role and duty is to toil until Ereshkigal takes him. Boys know of this first death, as they chatter about this or that girl's hair, or her eyes, or her legs, or that mythic fabled place that lies between them. They know that her allure is also an ambush. This vagina really does have teeth. They have seen their older brothers who departed along that path, now loaded with the responsibilities of a man. They watch as one by one their friends succumb, depart from the band of brothers for the embrace of a woman, an embrace that will cost them everything they have. But they are heedless and fly into the flame that will destroy their wings like moths. So quick are they to lose their precious freedom. They also know, even if only subconsciously, that they must accept the responsibility and mortality of a man and put away the childish things, if they are to be men. This is Mephisto and his contract with Faust. I shall give you what you dream of, but then you must pay. Men must accept duty and the death of innocence. They must pass through that ring of fire, pick up the yoke that will burden them for the rest of their lives. Who do you think Peter Pan is? He is you, he is your brother, he is every man, but somehow he evaded the flame and remained a boy, never growing old. Do you not see what that means? He, by doing so, became immortal. He overcame the greatest fear that men have by refusing to grow old. But what does that actually mean? It means refusing the goddess fatal to men honey trap. Yet in the end, it did not satisfy him. Tinker Bell's obviously sexual love for Peter could not be requited, for if ever he had slipped inside her heavenly tunnel, he could never, because she's a fairy and not a human, have returned to the real world. He would have been trapped in another reality. Instead, Peter became enslaved to Wendy's mortal vagina, and so, rather than being locked forever in Neverland with Tinker Bell, he returned to this world. He accepted his duty as a man, became old and died. In this simple play, full of swash and buckle, written for children, J.M. Barrie tackled our very deepest philosophical concerns, the duty of men and their mortality. And he was no less successful than Shakespeare in doing so. Thank you.